This is a story about a ballroom full of expensive suits and shining crystal, and how they all suddenly forgot how to breathe, all because of a quiet woman, a worn coat, and a pair of scuffed shoes. Two cops told her to leave her own son's medal ceremony. They didn't tell her to leave because she was causing trouble or making a scene, but because her appearance simply didn't match the price tag of the room. And she didn't fight. She just stood there, gripping something small and fragile in her hands. And within 5 minutes, the entire elegant scene shattered, proving that honor isn't measured in dollars or silk, but in sacrifice. The grand ballroom of the Magnolia Crest Hotel buzzed with that high society hum. The soft clink of highball glasses, the whispered laughter, the kind of polished, sterile noise that wealth makes when it gathers to congratulate itself. It was the annual Governor's Valor Gala, a night where the city's elite came to honor heroes while quietly reminding everyone of their own tax-deductible generosity. I remember the crystal chandeliers casting a warm, deceptive glow, making everything look golden and perfect. But then Mrs. Evelyn Carter appeared at the entrance, and the perfection fractured. Evelyn was 50, but the kind of hard-working 50 that looks 10 years older. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, tired bun. Her faded wool coat had seen maybe 22 many winters, and the black shoes she wore had walked more miles on hospital floors and factory concrete than they had on marble. Her hands were weathered, gripping a wrinkled manila envelope, and in her other, she clutched a small, cracked photograph of a young man in an army uniform, his smile blindingly bright, now just a painful memory. She was a stark, almost offensive contrast to the opulent crowd, drawing stares and whispers that felt like needles. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I think you're severely mistaken about the location," a voice snapped from behind her. It was Officer Dale, a young security detail cop, stiff and pressed, approaching with his partner, Officer Riggins, close behind. Dale was 28, full of that self-important confidence that comes from confusing a uniform with actual authority. His badge shone, his demeanor was dismissive, and he looked Evelyn up and down like she was a stain on the immaculate carpet. "This is a private, black-tie event for invited benefactors and families only," Dale announced, his voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "You'll need to leave immediately." Evelyn's grip tightened on the envelope, her knuckles white. "I have an invitation," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper against the ambient chatter. My son, Sergeant Alex Reed, is receiving an honor today." She held out the crumpled paper, her hands trembling, but Dale didn't even take it. He just smiled, a condescending, practiced curl of the lip. "Ma'am, I'm sure you believe that, but this doesn't look legitimate. These ceremonies are strictly for military families, and frankly, you don't project the proper decorum for such a distinguished event. I'm going to have to ask you to leave peacefully." Riggins took up a flanking position, cutting off any retreat. From across the room, the source of most of the night's money spotted the commotion. Mr. Julian Vance, the 40-something CEO of a major tech firm, who had paid enough to have his company logo plastered on every banner, strode over. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Evelyn's yearly rent, and his Italian shoes clicked authoritatively on the marble. "Officers, what is the difficulty here?" he asked, though his tone already indicated he agreed with the eviction. "Sir, simply removing an accidental intruder," Dale explained, his chest puffing up at the attention of a man so important. "She claims to have an invitation, but there's clearly been confusion regarding the guest list's quality control." Julian's eyes swept over Evelyn's tired coat and worn face with barely concealed disgust. "I see," he said, his voice carrying the finality of a closing argument. "Well, we can't have just anyone disrupting the dignity of this evening. These families have sacrificed enough without having to deal with this." He gestured vaguely at Evelyn, as if she were a piece of misplaced furniture. Evelyn's hands shook violently, but the tremor was now fueled by something fierce, not just fear. "I am the mother of a hero," she declared, her voice finding strength and locking onto Julian's arrogant gaze. "My son, Alex Reed, died fighting for this country, and I have every right to be here when he receives his honor." The rush of desperate, raw words hung in the air, but they only seemed to amuse Dale. "Lady, I think you've been watching too many Hallmark movies," Dale sneered, his patience snapping. "Military families don't look like you. Let me see this so-called invitation." Before she could protest, he snatched the crumpled paper. Without even unfolding it, he ripped it in half. The sound of the tearing paper was loud, shockingly brutal in that refined silence. The pieces fluttered down, and with them, Evelyn's last shred of composure. She dropped to her knees, scrambling to collect the fragments, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she choked, whispering against the marble floor. "That was all I had left of him. Please, you don't understand." But Dale wasn't finished. He pulled the photograph from her other hand, holding it up mockingly. "This your son? Looks like every other recruit in basic training, probably found it at a second-hand store." And without warning, he dropped the photo and brought his polished boot down on it, the glass frame cracking under the pressure. Evelyn let out a guttural sob, a sound of anguish that came straight from her soul. Julian, seeing the small spectacle was disrupting the canapes, clapped his hands once. "That's quite enough. Remove her from the premises immediately." Dale reached down, grabbing Evelyn's arm roughly to physically lift her. But just as his hand clamped onto her shoulder, the atmosphere in the room shifted. From the back row of chairs, where 7 men in identical dark, well-cut suits had been sitting silently throughout the ceremony, came the sound of chairs scraping back hard against the floor. The men rose as one, their movements synchronized, purposeful, their presence suddenly filling the entire space with an unshakable gravity. "I suggest you take your hands off her," a voice commanded from the back, cold and steady as winter steel. The words cut across the room with military precision. For the first time, Dale's confidence wavered, his hand freezing on Evelyn's shoulder. The speaker was already moving, followed by the 6 others, their bearing screaming that they were not men to be trifled with. Major Ethan Cole, 45, stepped forward, his eyes sharp and assessing, fixing on Officer Dale with the kind of intensity that makes a man regret every choice he's ever made. His dress uniform was impeccable, rows of ribbons and medals telling a silent story of service far beyond what any businessman or city cop could comprehend. "I said, take your hands off her," Major Cole repeated, the unmistakable tone of absolute command honed over 2 decades of service, leaving no room for argument. Dale's hand dropped as if burned. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm doing my job here. This woman is disrupting a high-value event." "Mrs. Carter," Major Cole countered, his voice cutting Dale's protestation like a scalpel, "has more right to be here than anyone else in this room." He moved to stand beside Evelyn, who was still kneeling, clutching the pieces of the photo and invitation. Julian Vance stepped forward, his face flushed with anger at having his authority challenged by a military man, no less. "Major Cole, I presume. I'm Julian Vance, the primary financial sponsor. I respect your service, but I cannot have this disruption. You are undermining the dignity of this entire ceremony." The major looked at him, his gaze heavy. "And you, Mr. Vance, have just desecrated the memory of a fallen hero." The crowd began to murmur, the realization hitting them. This was not a simple security issue. Evelyn, struggling to her feet, clutching the broken photo to her chest, spoke, her voice ringing out across the hushed room, clear and strong despite the tears. "My son's name is Sergeant Alex Reed, and he died serving this country." Major Cole placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Carter was specifically invited to witness her son receive the honor he earned with his life. Anyone who thinks she doesn't belong here," he turned to address the whole room, his voice gaining volume, "doesn't understand what real sacrifice looks like." Julian's face went crimson. The police officers exchanged uncertain glances, their ground dissolving beneath their polished boots. "Prepare for a special honors ceremony," Major Cole stated, turning to the event staff, his authority undeniable. "Full honor guard formation, immediately." Julian's voice was now desperate. "You can't be serious. I've invested hundreds of thousands into this event." "Mr. Vance," Major Cole's expression hardened, "I suggest you take your seat and prepare to learn something about real honor, because what you're about to witness will change everything you think you know about service and sacrifice." He gestured to the 6 men behind him, and they began to move forward with purpose. The room fell into a suspended, deafening silence. Major Cole then addressed the entire gathering, his voice solemn. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to share the truth about Sergeant Alex Reed, the young man whose mother you've just witnessed being humiliated." Sergeant Alex Reed died 6 months ago in a close-quarters engagement in the Cunner Valley. He began, his words precise and measured. He was 24 years old, and he gave his life in service. His mother, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, has been waiting for this day to see her son receive the recognition he earned through his ultimate sacrifice. Julian's face contorted with disbelief. That's impossible. This woman is the mother of some soldier? He gestured dismissively at her worn coat, his voice losing all conviction. Evelyn stepped forward, no longer cowering. You think dignity comes from expensive clothes? She challenged, her voice strong, captivating the entire room. You think sacrifice is measured by the size of your bank account? I worked 3 jobs and sold my house, just so he could complete his training without worrying about debt. I gave up everything so he could serve his country with honor. Her raw, undeniable emotion electrified the air. Several guests looked away, suddenly realizing they were witnessing something truly shameful. Major Cole revealed the identity of the men standing beside him. Mr. Vance, you see those 7 men walking toward us? They are scout snipers from the Marine Corps, and Sergeant Alex Reed saved every one of their lives. The words fell like stones into still water. Julian's face went ghostly white. The 7 Marines formed a semicircle around Major Cole and Evelyn. The lead Marine, Gunnery Sergeant Morales, a man in his early 30s with a visible scar along his jawline, stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, 6 months ago, we were trapped during a reconnaissance mission. Outnumbered, outgunned, and pinned down in a rocky gorge. By all rights, we should have all perished that day. His voice grew distant, reliving the horror. We were saying our last goodbyes on the radio. But Sergeant Reed, he was quiet. Then, suddenly, without a word, he vaulted over our cover. He started shouting, firing his weapon, making himself the biggest target possible. We heard the enemy fire shift toward him instantly. But that, ladies and gentlemen, was our only door. That's when we had our chance to escape. Gunnery Sergeant Morales' voice cracked. Major Cole stepped in, his tone transforming the air into something sacred. Sergeant Alex Reed single-handedly saved 7 lives that day. He chose to run into enemy fire, drawing their attention away from his trapped comrades and giving them the chance to escape. For this act of conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, Sergeant Alex Reed will be receiving the Medal of Honor today. The announcement echoed through the silence. Julian Vance whispered, barely audible, 7 lives. The implications crushed him. One by one, the Marines added their testimony. Ma'am, your son saved my life. I have a wife and 2 young children because of your son. Another, he carried me 2 miles on a broken leg. He wouldn't leave me behind. The accumulated weight of their testimonies cemented the reverence in the room. Major Cole reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded, worn piece of paper. This is Alex's final letter home. He handed it to Evelyn with the reverence one would accord a sacred relic. Evelyn's hands shook as she read it aloud, her voice breaking. Dear Mom, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it home. But I want you to know that everything I did because you taught me what it means to be brave. You showed me that real courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared. The silence was complete. Officer Dale had removed his cap, holding it respectfully. Julian Vance stood frozen, the full horror of having insulted the mother of a Medal of Honor recipient crashing down upon him. From the back, an 8th figure rose. Master Sergeant Jones, Alex's former squad leader, older, silver-haired, his presence commanding. I was the one who held him as he died, he said, his voice carrying the gravitas of absolute authority. His last words were, tell my mom I kept my promise. Tell her I was brave. The 8 Marines snapped to attention and rendered a flawless, long, reverent salute to Evelyn Carter, a recognition of her status as a Gold Star mother. Mrs. Carter, Major Cole announced, his voice formal. On behalf of a grateful nation, I present to you the Medal of Honor, awarded posthumously to your son, Sergeant Alex Reed. He placed the wooden box, its surface worn, into her trembling hands. She opened it, and the medal, with its blue ribbon, caught the light, seeming to glow with an inner fire. The entire auditorium began to rise, not by order, but by collective spirit. The applause that followed was slow, deliberate, like the rhythmic beating of a collective heart honoring a fallen hero. The transformation was palpable. A shallow social event had become a sacred ceremony of true honor. Julian Blackwood felt the weight of every eye in the room focused on him with contempt. Master Sergeant Jones turned to face Julian directly, his expression cold and unforgiving. "Sir, you have 30 seconds to explain to Mrs. Carter why you felt it appropriate to insult her son's memory and destroy her invitation." Julian stammered, his confidence utterly shattered. I didn't know. I thought she was just. She looked like. You thought she was just what?" demanded Gunnery Sergeant Morales, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Just a poor woman who didn't deserve basic human dignity? Someone you could dismiss because she didn't fit your idea of what a military family should look like." Evelyn, clutching the medal to her chest, looked up at Julian, her eyes holding sadness, not anger. "My son died for you too," she said quietly. "He died protecting the freedom of every person in this country, including the freedom for people like you to make money and live comfortable lives. He never asked what you looked like. He just did his duty." Julian dropped to his knees in front of her, tears streaming down his face. "Mrs. Carter, I am the most foolish man who ever lived. I insulted your son's memory. I have no excuse, and I don't deserve your forgiveness." Evelyn placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Alex would want you to learn from this. He would want you to become a better person. Don't waste that chance." Her forgiveness was unconditional, but it carried a lifelong challenge. Major Cole intervened. "Mr. Vance, the question now is what you intend to do about it." Julian, rising slowly, announced his intent. He would immediately establish the Sergeant Alex Reed Memorial Foundation, funded primarily by his fortune, to support Gold Star families and provide scholarships for the children of the fallen. Officer Dale and Riggins, humbled and ashamed, later requested transfers to community policing, determined to serve with dignity. 1 year later, Evelyn Carter stood at a different podium, in the auditorium of the Central County High School, far from the Magnolia Crest Hotel. She was there for the opening ceremony of the foundation, a program that would fund education for military children. "I have my son's promise," she said, placing the Medal of Honor in a permanent display case. "And now that promise will help other children take their next steps forward." Standing beside her was a teenager named David, the son of one of the Marines Alex had saved, the first scholarship recipient. In the back of the auditorium, barely visible, Julian Vance stood watching, a man visibly changed, his presence measured not by his wealth, but by his quiet, consistent support of the foundation. Evelyn Carter had proven that a mother's love could nurture the greatest heroism, and that sometimes the most humble among us possess the deepest reserves of honor. Her story is a reminder that dignity is not a commodity, and sacrifice is often invisible. What does true honor look like to you? Who are the unsung heroes in your life who taught you courage? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more true stories of courage and transformation.